My name is Allan Gregersen. This is Michael Rasmussen. We're from the Javillian team. We are happy to be here to present the runtime class reloading for dummies. I know it's kind of rude to put dummies in the title because I knew that no dummies would be here except for like one guy that I know of. So, but anyways, we are really thrilled to see so many people here. We're going to talk about class reloading, and we'll tell something about Javeleon, our class reloading system, and I'll be doing most of the talking. And Michael, my lovely assistant here as always, will perform some very cool live demos along the way. So yeah, as this is above, just feel free to jump in, any questions along the way, and we don't necessarily have to go through it all. I have some cool demos at the very end, so I hope to be going through it all, but there should be some time for questions and answers at the end. So let's get going. So what is class reloading actually? Well, you can say, simply said, it's basically changing a class code while it actually runs inside an application, right? That sounds pretty easy. So what are the mechanisms that we can actually do in plain old Java? Well, we have the hot swap, as you probably all know. You have some class with some codes in it. You have your IDE running some debugging session. The developer decides to change the code, press the hot swap, and the hot swap actually changed the code. So the only problem here is, that's all good, right? But the only problem is that it only supports changing method bodies. And it doesn't really do the trick, right? Because it doesn't allow for any true class evolution. Developers tend to perhaps write too long methods because they really want to avoid these redeploys because they are really, truly annoying. So we simply need something more powerful here. So, in Javelion, what we are all about is this class reloading stuff. And we do support a bunch of additional features to the hot swap. So we have this simple student class here, and we can put in new fields, you can remove fields, you can change parameters, you can put in new methods, you can also remove them in any way you like. And we can even implement new interfaces for existing classes, which is pretty unique compared to other systems out on the marketplace. And last but not least, you can also change the superclass, and we will see examples of this in just a few minutes. So why don't you, Michael, take over and show a cool demo of some of this stuff?
Oh, okay. Let me just switch to my screen. Yeah. So I have this very, very simple student application. We can create a student with a name, and let's see, Michael. But so to show some of those class changes that I was talking about, let's add a student ID. So we create an ID, and well, the ID will just create it as a counter, and it's just a static counter. Well, we'll start at 42. Those of you in the audience will probably know why. And just to show that we'll there we go. So this is all nice and good, and we'll save it, and let's see what happens over here. Oh, we got some student IDs, but as you can see, since we are assigning the ID in the constructor, and the constructor is only meant to be run once per object, it doesn't reflect it, it just has the standard value. So let's try something different instead. Instead of calling it, let's create a new variable. I'll just delete the old one and then call it student ID instead. And then we'll do a class level initialization instead. Student ID. Let's see what happens here. Whoopsie. Now we have a field that automatically initializes just because it's initialized outside of the constructor. And if you see, we'll add Greg, whatever, and it'll continue adding, incrementing the ID as expected. Now, let's try some of the changes in class hierarchy. Let's start with a new interface. So let's see, let's create an interface, listable, whatever. And let's add this. And just to show that we're using it, return list plus string. Okay, so now we've implemented an interface. Let's use it as well. So in our list model for this list, let's just change it to listables instead. And since right now when I'm clicking it, I have a student selected method here that pops up the value. So let's change that instead to say listable, and call the list method. Let's save, and then now try clicking. Whoops, as you can see here, it's now using the listable interface and the listable method instead. Let's go one step further and create a superclass person. So let's separate, let's put the name in here instead. So now we have a simple superclass for the student. Let's extend it as well. And then we don't need the name here anymore. Notice I had the same variable name, string, the name, a variable called, field called name of the type string, which was the same as I had in the student class. And the reason why I did that is because when I then update it now, it still gets the same. The state from my student was actually moved to the person. To show you this, let's just do this. And you can actually see that the state was moved to the superclass. So, yeah, I think Anna will talk a bit further.
Sure. So that was pretty cool, right? And it's kind of funny when Michael say "whoops," it means it was a big success. That's just what he does. But every time he said "whoops," then it's a good thing. So don't worry. So yeah, that was pretty amazing because what you just saw here was existing objects having been created, changing the superclass to those existing objects. That's a pretty cool feature to me. So, and what he also kind of jumped a bit too much forward. Once Michael got going, he just, woof, it's just amazing. So he also showed that you can actually preserve the state when you move the field upwards into a new superclass. So we already showed this. And you also saw that the state was actually preserved. And that also accounts for changing or moving fields downwards into a subclass if that's what you need. Okay, so we already saw that demo. So talking a bit more about the constructor problem. As Michael said, well, constructors are really meant for just creating objects, and they should only be executed like once per object, right? It's pretty important for the language to actually work. So, and we did see Javelian's automatic field initialization support. That's kind of like incremental or partial initialization of the object, right? But you can have many other stuff inside a constructor. And that becomes truly evident when you have like UI classes where you have this frames, windows, having a call to an init components method. That's pretty standard. And those new codes inside the constructor will not be rerun, so you will not see anything in the in the UI. And Michael will show this in a demo in just a minute. So pretty much any new code added to the constructor will not be re-executed because we can't infer which codes and which not to execute for this particular constructor. That's basically impossible. So that's where these object transformers come in very handy. And what is an object transformer? Well, in Javillian we have this special method called Javeleon $updated that actually gets executed once for each object after the class has been redefined for this object. So let's just see, again, switching to Michael, a short demo of how this actually works in a real application.
Yeah, okay, so let's try making a change to the UI. Let's see. Yeah, okay, this is the built-in NetBeans UI editor, so let's just find something, a text field. Let's drag it into place. So. And let's use it for showing the info. Instead of when you click on the person right now, it pops up a message dialog. Let's add that to a text field on top of it instead. So let's, come on. Let's just give this a meaningful name. Text info. And doesn't really need to have a text to begin with. So, and save this. As you can see here from the constructor, it calls the init component methods, which initializes everything. But when I go over here, nothing happens because the constructor has run once. So I'll just quickly implement the method that Alan mentioned. Whoopsie, I had it here already. Which just clears. This is a symbol for UI. It works very well. You just clear the existing components from the content pane and then initialize a new. And when you do that, whoopsie, you get the text field up here. And to see it in use, we'll just change this to say text info.set text and selected.list. Let's remove this method again. We don't need it anymore. We've already accomplished what it does. So now when we that's coming out this line. That's annoying. There we go. Now when we do the selection, it pops up at the top instead of in a message dialog. So, back to you, Alan.
Great. It seems like Michael is really on fire today. To me, that looked pretty good. So, instead of having this Javelian $updated, it's not actually convenient to have that in your production code. If you forget to uncomment it, it looks like it's just annoying, right? It's convenient for these small kinds of stuff that Michael just showed you, but it can become just, some people are just annoyed by having to write this artificial method in their production code. So what we can do instead is actually give you a reload listener that will actually notify your code when classes are reloaded, and you can implement, if you have like complex UI things, you can just repaint or whatever you need to do on every class reload for specific classes. And we can do that. You just simply have, you don't actually need to depend on our code. We have just implemented this using a simple change listener. And it's simply configured as a JVM argument by a Javelian.reload.listener and then a fully qualified name for your class. And we will generate an object and invoke the method. So an example of this is this simple Javelian listener where you have this main UI handler object, and you get this object from somewhere. He would just use the get main UI method that is not showed here. So you have this main UI entry or reference, and when the classes are reloaded, it simply just refreshes the UI as needed. So it's pretty convenient as well if you don't like this weird methods ending up in your production code. So we've talked about some nice features in basic class reloading and some pretty advanced stuff by changing the superclass. Talked about the constructors, and then we have the problem on static initializers as well. So what should actually happen to a class once it's reloaded? What should happen to the static block? You could have changed code inside the static initializer, right? You could have new static fields, and what should we do? What should Javillian actually do when classes are reloaded? It's actually a really good question. should it just re-execute the static initializer? Well, perhaps that's sometimes what you really want to do. And unfortunately, that's not always what you want to do. And we cannot really infer this anyway in general. So it's impossible for us to know whether you needed to reinitialize the static initializer or not. So, but I can say it can actually lead to severe side effects, and not to mention that by re-executing it, it would actually wipe out the entire static state for that particular class. And that may also lead to some weird problems in your application. So you can have this lost state and errors and specific things that only needs to be run like once. You end up in illegal access errors and illegal state exceptions. And I've seen this in some of our users. So what could we actually do to make this quite just a little bit better? Well, Javillian has some nice support for actually initializing new static fields. So if you add a new static field, we will actually pick up the code to initialize that specific field without touching any of the other things in the static initializer. And so that means we actually keep the state for the static stuff. And Michael will just briefly show how this actually works in the application.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch back here. So earlier we actually saw me doing earlier that I added a static student counter, but just to show that it's not reset when adding other things. Let's see, blah, 1, 2, 3. You can see now. Let's go over here. If you look up top, you can see that the new field was initialized to the value 1, 2, 3. And the old one, you can see this, the student counter is still counting up from the old value it had. So the values of the existing static fields are preserved while new fields are initialized to the value that's set. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So so all this class reloading is pretty awesome, right? So, but really, is that enough to support your updates of your running application? Well, it turns out it's not just quite enough. You have, for instance, the NetBeans platform, which we have had like good integration with in the last few years. They have all these declarative stuffs inside the NetBeans platform, windowing system, file actions, that you can actually register. You actually need to put in some annotations on top of classes. Those are pre-processed by annotation preprocessors. And if you don't know about this stuff, it's pretty cool, and you can talk to Jaroslav Tulak here in the audience if you like. It's pretty cool stuff. But these are picked up by annotation preprocessors and stored or generates a layer XML file that we can actually pick up. So, but you need specific integrations in order to pick that stuff up besides the basic class reloading, right? So Javillian has some nice support in this regard, and let's just go to a demo of this.
Okay, so I fired up an empty NetBeans application platform. So this is, well, just to have some simple. It's what a basic NetBeans platform application has. So let's just have a module here called demo, and let's just add a simple action to it. So let's see, action, whatever. Hello world, that'll be fine, and oh. Come on. Show. Let's save. And for NetBeans, we do complete module reloads at the time. So let's see if our new menu item did appear. We have it right here now in file. Hello world. Hello Java 1. And just to show the generated file for this, it's down. No, that's the one there. This is the generated file that contains all the metadata required to add the new action in the menu. which was empty beforehand, and which Javillian then picked up and was able to parse and integrate into the running application. So, Alan?
Okay, so that was just like one example of our integrations. So what about Java EE? Can we do something about all the web frameworks and containers and all that stuff that really needs specific integration? And we have just released, just over 24 hours ago, we released Javelion 3.0 with new Java EE support. So now we actually can do something in this market as well. So web applications, they tend to just use a broad variety of containers and frameworks, and many of them use some kind of cache mechanisms, class metadata about classes. So when you actually change a method, add a method or remove a method, it won't really show up in the application, or you will end up having no such method errors because of the method will not be picked up because it happened not to be in the cache. So we need to clear all those caches at appropriate times and really deeply integrate with these kind of things. So why don't Michael show a JBus demo? He needs just a few seconds to set up, but let's just switch. Okay. It's just starting up, so it should be okay.
Yeah, I'm just firing up right now. So let's see if this is. Oh.
Okay, so it looks like I will have my Spring demo. Instead, I have one demo today, and it's just having one demo is dangerous because it always just fails, like Mark Reinholdt yesterday. So I hope it will work out. So we have specific integration with a number of containers, and we have just begun our quest to support pretty much any major servers and frameworks out there. And we add more support by the day, so you should check back to see, and you can comment with feature requests for your own specific frameworks, and we'll look at it. So we have Tomcat 6 and 7, Jetty 7 and 8, and JBus 7.1 integration. You can have class reloading in those as of now. We have some bean validation support, Spring model view controller. You can do some cool stuff in there. Weld integration, REST-easy, and more. And I'll just do a quick demo, showing a demo of an application I found on the internet. I know that there's one guy that probably will recognize this application, but never mind. It was just something I found. So it's just a simple pet application where you can just add some pets and you can view information about pets, but you really can't because that's not implemented yet. So let's go on and change that in the code. I know that I can just uncomment this in an existing controller, this new request mapping, but I really want to show a bit more in this demo. So let's try to add a new controller and a new auto-wired DAO object and see if that can actually work. So I'm going to create a new controller. Here, and I'll just add the controller annotation. I will just copy the request mapping to the new controller and uncomment it. And there's a bunch of imports that I need to do. Yep. Oh, I need to auto-wire this DAO field, right? So I need an auto-wired field. Like that. And the annotation for that. Like that. And one more import and we should be ready. 2 more imports. So let's try to save that file and see if we have the new request mapping. Well, we had. So we can actually change request mappings, auto-wired, and inject new beans and Spring and all this stuff. And I really encourage you to try this out. Yeah, and are you ready with the JBus demo? Good. So let's switch to Michael.
Yeah. Okay, so just to show that we also have some support for JBoss, I have a simple Java EE. Some of you might know it. It's the default Maven architect JBoss. So let's just try some of the things we have support for right now. So if we try to add a new member here, we'll see, okay, let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, bean validation. Right now, this phone number requires to be between 10 and 12 characters long. But since we're Danes, and in Denmark, phone numbers are 8 characters long. So let's just change the bean validation for that to only require 8 characters instead. And let's see if that's, and now it works. Now we have it validated because we changed the validation to 8 instead of 10. Similar, let's look at some of the REST easy stuff that it has right here. If you look at here, we have a simple XML of the member we just created. But let's try to add a new field to this bean. So let's just add an alternate phone number and add getters and setters for it. So if we save this and reload here, now we have the alternate phone numbers showing up as well. But let's try something more. Let's try actually creating something new. Let's create a JSON for it instead. So now we add a new path for the REST easy with a JSON and the ID, just to show that it doesn't exist beforehand. Doesn't exist. Now we save and it's reloaded, and let's try. And now we have the JSON variation of this member. Yeah. And back to you, Alan.
Yeah. That was pretty cool Java EE demos, and again I encourage you to try this out and give us feedback and comments and feature requests, because we really need it at this moment. So I guess we kind of speeded through this session, and but that just gives us more time for questions. So I hope that you do have some questions. Yep. It's pretty IDE dependent. All we do is actually you only need to add like 1 or 2, actually 2 JVM arguments, like a Java agent and a boot class path. That's it. So you can tweak the debugging by going. It gets pretty annoying in any debugger if you have all these synthetic methods that we need to add. So you can just add a simple filter and not going into synthetic methods, and you're done. We don't need any deep integrations in any IDE to actually work.
Yeah, just to show, these 2 lines is all that's required to add to any JVM to enable our Javillian to work. So
it's pretty easy to use. There may be some configuration with the mapping of workspaces and where class loaders and application servers loaders actually load classes that you can set up by simply providing an XML file. Simple configuration. Yep.
Is that only for IDE-specific servers starting up, or can you do remote as well?
Right now, we don't have support for remoting. That's something that we need to look into. So, and we'll be looking into shortly. Good question. Yep. How we're doing it? It's magic. Yeah. If I was supposed to tell you how we did it, it would take me like 5 hours. But basically, we instrument classes as they're loaded, enabling them to. We set in some hooks and enabling them to actually reload once we have a reload event. That's the very short version. And I don't know if it really makes any sense. Yeah, at the back. Comparing Javillian to JRebel. Well, Javillian can do like unique things like changing implemented interfaces, changing the super type. It can do automatic initialization of fields, instance, and static fields. Javillian has a bunch of support for many, many frameworks and many servers, and we will get there eventually. But that's pretty much the main difference right now. JRebel has been around for years, and it's more mature, and we admit that. But I think that we are on the right path. Yeah. Could you hear that, Michael? I couldn't.
When I try to use the WebLogic server,
Mm-hmm.
simple features cannot, for example, internal follow the change of the network can work.
I couldn't really hear it. Are you talking about simple changes to, yeah.
When I try to use with WebLogic server, Javeleon, simple features are working. For example, the changing internal of the method, and when try to load the class and without restarting the, can I see the changes or not?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Any change to classes will be actually picked up by our class reloading system. We don't have WebLogic support yet, but that's also something that we will need to look into. So we have Tomcat, Jetty, and JBoss for now. But we added this like in a few months, so I would expect many more servers to come and many more frameworks. It has been easier, fortunately, than we anticipated to integrate with these. And I'm sure we'll get a number of issues in, like any other software. I can see issues for looking at the JRebel forum as well. So yeah, any such issues are mostly welcomed, and we're pretty good at fixing those issues. So
I have a different Java concept that you
mm-hmm.
If they modify the Java file, if I drop in here, will it pick it up automatically?
It requires a little bit more configuration. It depends on whether or not you use custom class loading to actually load this jar file. But if it's just like a simple library file that you actually change, it can be set up to actually pick up the changes to that file as well. Yeah. Yep.
What versions of Java are useful now?
Java 6 and 7. We could support Java 5, but it seems like not many users are still on Java 5. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah?
One very obvious application of this framework is rapid application development. But do you also see any other real-world applications besides this use case?
I'm not sure what you mean. What other use cases?
What are the other real-world cases where such a library would become useful?
Well, I mean, any.
Rapid application development.
To me, when I'm doing like any project in Java, I really think that this is very useful, because you do restart, even small restarts for small projects. It really gets really annoying, and you do all these context switches, and it's a lot more fun to have this incremental development cycle that you can like interactively see the changes, and you can just stay focused. That's yeah. So I would say any project, but I may be wrong. Maybe people disagree with me, but I would say I would use it always. And people also tend to sort of work around this restarting problem by adding more test-driven development, and it really just adds to the complexity, because you need to write a bunch of dry code, and then you need to test it. And if the test is successful, it's good, but you may actually test way too much code at the time. So this is really good for, it really changes the way you code, I believe. So by allowing you to see small incremental changes really makes a huge difference. Yeah. I would say as long as are you generating source code or bytecode, that doesn't really matter. Yeah. And then you compile it, and then you load it with some loader, right? And if it gets loaded with a loader, then we will transform it, those classes, the same as they were ordinary application classes. So it wouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Is what?
Yeah. Yes, it is fully supported.
Okay, I didn't hear.
As you may have noticed, we did annotation changes, so annotation reflection is also supported. A lot of the EE examples we used for annotations.
Yeah. If reflection was not supported, we would be in deep trouble because not much would actually work. Any other questions? Well then, thank you. You have a question? You can go to Javelian.com and sign up for a free trial. What?
Yes, it's a licensed product.
Yeah, it is.
There's a trial period, free trial period where you can use it, 14 days, and then after that it's a commercial product.
Yep. So please try it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.